sometimes what can happen is when parents notice that their teens are in their room and they're not communicating, they start to panic and they reach and they grasp and they want more control. And so they lean in more, which will inevitably push their teenager away.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how easy it is for marriage to take a back seat. But unlike your parents' marriage, your marriage can feel good while raising kids and doesn't have to feel hard. It can look like having each other's backs, even flirting and looking forward to spending time with each other. And I'm here to help you. So join me here each week as we dive into what it takes for your marriage to become something you enjoy again, from how to handle conflict better and bringing that spark back into your relationship. If you're ready for your marriage to feel good again, this podcast is for you. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I have an amazing guest here today, Jennifer Delliquadri. She's tackling something that is very much relevant to me in my current stage of parenthood that we actually haven't touched on in this podcast, even though we are well into our, 100-something episode, and that's teenagers. Okay. Whoa, this is like a whole new world for me. I've got a 14-year-old, and I cannot tell you how many times I've just gone up to my husband and be like, how do we handle this? Okay, so I was super excited to have you on here, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on here. I know that the 2 audiences that we serve overlap a great deal. So it's really great to be able to share some information with your audience here.
Yeah, I'm super stoked, just personally. And I know that so many others who listen to this who have teenagers or are getting ready to be a parent to a teenager will get so much out of this. So the topic we are covering today is how to stay connected with your teenager. Now, if you think back to when you were a teenager, I'm sure you can remember how much you wanted to spend less time with your parents and more time with your friends. And that's natural. Before we dive into this, let me introduce to you Jennifer and her background. She helps parents and teenagers feel more connected with each other and more confident in their lives. She's a certified professional coach and yoga instructor with a master's degree in education. Okay, so Where do you live? And how old are your kids?
I live in the Pacific Northwest in Southwest Washington, and I have 2 teenagers of my own. They are now 17 and 18, which is just crazy to say because I've been through all of it. And having been a coach specifically for teens and parents for about 4 years now, I dove into this because I remembered how hard it is to be a teenager when my girls became teenagers themselves. So just to complete the picture, I have my 2 daughters and I also live with my husband and my 2 dogs. And so that's where I am in my life. But coaching teenagers, coaching parents is my specialty. It's what I love to do. And I am just so excited to be able to share my expertise to help your audience feel more connected with their teenagers as well.
Yes, teenage girls. I am so glad my daughter is the youngest.
Yeah. Well, that's funny that you bring that up because I remember when my girls were young, other parents would always say is, oh, you just wait until the teen years. And especially with girls, because generally speaking, girls are, quote, easier when they're younger and boys are more challenging when they're younger. And then they flip in the teen years. And that's the message I received over and over and over and over. And I am here to say that, yes, in my experience, it was 100% true. My girls weren't easy when they were young, but I have to say that the level of difficulty went up proportionally when they hit those tween years specifically, right around 10, 11, 12. I was like, wow, my approach to parenting is going to have to change and I need to learn something more than what I was taught when they were younger because that's not going to work here.
Yeah, and not having had a teenage girl yet, I had that experience as well with our son where I'm like, well, what happened? But we'll dive into that in a little bit. So what are some parenting do's and don'ts when it comes to raising a teenager, because like we've already kind of like alluded to, it is a completely different approach that we need to take, because I know that what I used to do was not working anymore, and it was almost like all of a sudden
Mhm.
it's like, well, I'm
Mhm.
still the same person. You're clearly not.
Yeah.
What happened here? Why wasn't there some like ease of transition? It's just like all of a sudden I couldn't
Mhm.
talk about serious things with them anymore. I couldn't
Mhm.
ask about, hey, how's class going? How are your friends doing? And
Yeah.
things that I feel like as adults and with little kids, we feel like someone really cares about us when they ask about what matters, instead of like,
Mhm.
how's your day? How's the weather? Like generic questions. When we ask
Mhm.
those deeper personal questions, that's when we're like, oh, they genuinely care about us. But with teenagers, it's not that.
Yeah. Don't ask me anything. The way I like to describe it is, first, have compassion for yourself through this transition. It is a grieving process. Watching your kid go from being a little bitty baby who depended on you for everything, and then within, I say 18 because generally speaking, that's when they're in your house, going all the way from there to they don't want anything to do with you to they're completely leaving. That there's a grieving process with that. And to just have compassion for that experience, first of all. And then also to realize that how you show up for your kids when they're little, if you take it from the experience of when they were itty bitty babies, before they were even toddlers, you were in charge of everything. You made all of the decisions. You knew what they were doing, where they were doing it, what they ate when they went to sleep. You were in charge of it all, and they depended on you for everything. And then as they enter toddler years, they start to push away a little bit, but they still really depend on you a lot. Then they enter education. And if they are going to school outside of the house, you don't have contact with them 6 to 8 hours of the day, maybe more. So their experience is separate from yours even more. And then as they grow into middle school, this is where that massive shift happens. And I'm speaking to specifically kids who are in education outside of the home. They literally and figuratively close the door to their parents. And the schools do it too, right? Like when they're in elementary schools, they're like, come on in, volunteer, help us out. We'd love to have you here, go on field trips. Then middle school, it's like, oh, just like gates closed. You can't come in anymore. And the teens, the middle schoolers are like, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't want my parents here. So it's like a slap in the face where you are literally forced to no longer be in charge of a big portion of your kid's life. And also, they don't want you to be part of it. So this is a big transitional phase where there's going to be a lot of learning on the parent and the child's part. But what I always like to explain to the parents is when they're going through this, I mentioned compassion, but also to think of the long game. What is it you want for your long-term relationship with your child? And everyone I talk to, it's the same. I want them to be grown, independent, but I want them to want to be with me and to talk to me and come to me for advice or just to hang out and have fun. And so these tween years can be kind of tricky because when they're pushing you away, a lot of parents are like, oh gosh, they don't need me anymore. They don't want me around. I've done something wrong or something has gone wrong. But the opposite is true. Nothing has gone wrong. In fact, it is expected that they do this. It's important that they do this to prepare for becoming an independent adult. So they're going to be spending more time in their room. They're going to be spending more time with their friends. They're not going to want to talk to you about everything, and they're going to start leaning on peers and outside influences for support. And so what I always like to describe is when the door is closing, I say literally in the house and they're in their room and they're not wanting to be around you as much, to think of it as though they're living in their own little apartment. They're practice living in an apartment, but it's under the safety of your own roof. So think about it that way. You're providing this safe place for them to practice living on their own. And then at the same time, provide a space for them to come out of the room that they actually want to be in. So sometimes what can happen is when parents notice that their teens are in their room and they're not communicating, they start to panic and they reach and they grasp and they want more control. And so they lean in more, which will inevitably push their teenager away. So instead, I like to refer to the 5-to-1 rule. So you may not see your teen as much. And when they come out, you may immediately want to be like, did you do your homework? Is your room clean? Are you, all the checklists? That's not going to make them want to be out of their room and around you. It just isn't. So the 5-to-1 rule is for every interaction that you have with them, 5 of the things that you say or talk about are just general or supportive. Like, good job doing this, or talking about the weather, or just talking about something you both have in common, to the one reminder, the one check-in, so that when they're coming out of their room and they're with you, they're not constantly being bombarded with, you're not keeping up, you're not good enough, you're not checking the boxes. So they actually want to be around you. So that is what I like to say. That's kind of like the very beginning transition from being a kid to being an older teen. And it is the hardest period for a lot of parents, those middle school years. And I can say, if you're in the middle of those middle school years, it gets better. They do come back. But it is important for you at that point to practice letting go. Letting go of the need to control, letting go of the need to know everything, to be involved in everything, and start small. That's always my advice. Pick one thing that you're like, you know what? I'm going to let my teenager be in control of this and let it go. And then pick another thing. Let them prove to you that they can do things independently. So for example, let them pack their own lunch, or let them decide what they want to wear to school. And pick something that's a little out of your comfort zone as a parent, but doesn't throw you into full-on panic. So if you're like, I can't let go of their assignments and their schoolwork because I'm like, oh no, everything's going to fall apart, then pick something small. Like, they're just in charge for this. And you no longer check in with them. I had a client once who every night she felt like she was spending so much energy just checking in with her daughter who's in middle school, making sure that she was washing her face and that she was picking out her outfit for tomorrow and like all of the evening routine. And then she decided, you know what, I'm going to find something else to do during that time. Make sure she understands, hey, this is the process, and let her do it. And of course, her daughter did it, right? And so that's the slow letting go that I like to have as like an introduction to transitioning from the kid to the teen.
I love that. It is truly a tough transition, I gotta say, from elementary to middle school. It's almost like, what just happened?
Yep.
Right? I remember when our teenager, he's finishing up 8th grade right now, but I remember when he went into 6th grade, I was like, okay, I'm starting to see little changes. You're starting to want to hang out more. You're asking for more freedom. But also he has ADHD. So that made it challenging because he often forgets to do his normal routine. And so we got in the habit of like just, oh, do this, do that, and like micromanaging him. And I love that you share the 5-to-1 ratio, because it's so easy to just get fixated on how is this going to be like when they grow up. We like almost forecast how it's going to be like based on how they are today, assuming they're not going to grow at all.
Right.
And it's out of love and concern, right? But I think it is really important to think of what's their experience of it. Yeah. So that 5-to-1 ratio that you shared is such a great perspective to take on, to imagine if you were in their shoes, right? What is their experience of you when they choose to be around you? And is it enjoyable?
Right.
And it now makes sense. Now as parents, we're like, that's why our parents nagged us so much.
Right?
Did we like it? No, we did not. So that's a really humbling, like, check yourself before you wreck yourself kind of thing.
Exactly. And all of these things, like you mentioned, are done out of love and of wanting what's best for your teenager. So many parents I work with, they're operating from fear and they don't even realize it. And what I work on with them is figuring out what is that underlying fear. So in middle school, in the letting go, they're afraid that their kid's going to fail or not be successful in their future or not graduate and be able to go to college and get a job. Or ultimately, their fear is that their kid is going to be unhappy. And so they're operating from the notion of what happiness is. And for a lot of us growing up, we were constantly bombarded with the message that this is the order of actions in your future. You finish high school, and then you go to college, and then you get a job, and then you buy a house, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and then you're happy. But that's just not true. And many of us get to that point and we're like, wait a second, I did all those things and I'm still feeling off or miserable or unhappy. And then we still impose those things on our kids because that's all we know. So it really comes with challenging yourself. And it really comes down to the expectations you have for your teenager. And that's the next thing that's so important to recognize, is that we all have preconceived notions of what it's going to be like to be a parent, what our kids are going to be like, and how they're going to grow up, what they're going to be into, and who they're going to hang around with, what sports they're going to play. And it's all going from this, I want what's best for them. And so according to us, XYZ is what's best for them. And then when the teenager veers away from that, parents get afraid. Like, oh no, they're not wanting to go to college. And then that fear comes up again. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to be happy. So it's so important as parents for us to recognize and check our expectations, because ultimately you're going to be disappointed. You just are. And to look at the expectations or what you're really wanting for your teen, and realizing what you're wanting is for them to be happy. And they're going to be happy when they're living life on their terms. Not because they are friends with the people you think that they should be friends with, not because they're popular, not because they're getting straight A's or they're the top athlete or they are going to the top school. I have so many teen clients who go to these amazing colleges because they worked their butts off in high school, and then they're absolutely miserable or they have no idea what they want to do with it. So check the expectations of the check boxes. And also, if your teenager wears clothes that you're like, what is going on there? Or listens to music and you're like, oh my gosh, there's something, or the shows or the friends or any type of identity that they take on. Notice if that ignites some fear in you, and then just get curious in it. What is it that I'm really afraid of here? What is it that I imagine is going to happen down the road? And then really give yourself the chance to answer that question. Because how realistic is it for you to lay out the path for your teenager and have them walk it exactly as you want them to? It's not going to happen. And the way to approach it is to imagine they are on their path, you are on your path. You're walking alongside them, especially as they transition into teenage and older teenage, is that they are there for you to support them as they make their decisions, not for you to make their decisions and for them to meet whatever that expectation is. So managing your expectations is a huge part of that.
I think it's really interesting that as parents, we're constantly facing what we grew up with, the expectations that were put on us, the messages we kept hearing, and having to deal with them as we are faced with different situations with our kids, from our parenting styles to how we approach different things with them. And it's like this process. We are healing from how we wish we were parented and we weren't parented that way, to how we want to parent, but we don't know how because we're just mimicking what we experience, and we're just like trying to learn all these things. And we know integrating what we learn is much easier said than done. And I think it's really helpful to check back on our intention and whether what we do and say actually matches that.
Mhm.
So we say we want to guide them, we don't want to control them, but is what we're doing actually accomplishing that? And I think just that simple reflection is very humbling.
Yeah, it takes courage to do that. It's a lot easier in some ways to just turn a blind eye on it and just assume that what you're doing is the best way to do it. But when the results that you're getting aren't really matching your efforts, it's time to turn things around and ask yourself, is this how I want to show up for my kids? Is this really going to benefit our long-term relationship? And also, how important is it for me to bring this up right now or talk about this right now or show up in this way? And one thing that a lot of the parents I work with have in common is that they are really hands-on, and they have been until their teen starts pushing them away or getting irritated with them or stopping talking with them about decisions because the parent is so used to, you should do this, go do this, get this job, do these things. And no one likes to be told what to do. But a teenager, if you're really wanting to build an independent, resilient adult, they need practice making their own decisions and also dealing with the consequences of those decisions. So that goes back to approaching the parenting with curiosity with them, but also curiosity with yourself. What's triggering me about this? And also, how would I like to show up for my teen? Then also curiosity with the teen. What might be leading them to do this? What might be their motivation? And even in those discussions that you have with them, to be curious. I'm curious to know your intention behind this. Or also, when a very great open-ended question that I always tell my clients is, how would you like me to support you with this?
Yeah, I think we go into it assuming we know what's best because we have more life experience,
Mhm.
but we only know what's best for us.
Yeah.
And I think so much of this is coming to terms with they are not us.
Mhm.
They're not like the mini version of us. They are their own person. And so much of our gripes with our parents is that they didn't honor us as individuals. And now here we go again, repeating that cycle with our own kids.
Mhm.
And it is so hard when they start to break away and assert their independence. But like you said, it is a healthy part of the process. That's a step that's needed for them to become the type of person we want them to become. But
Mhm.
these are the years where we want to shield them because they're still in our minds our babies, right? We haven't had that full detachment yet beyond
Mhm.
school and them hanging out with friends, but they are literally detaching their identity from us and becoming their own person. And I think the most I've had struggle with that I'm still working through is continuing to question myself on why things need to be in a certain way in my mind. What real life consequences does this have for
Mhm.
him if he chooses to do it a different way or to not do it or to do it at a different time? And
Yeah.
I will say it is very mentally taxing to
Mhm.
think like this.
Yeah. That's a good reminder. It isn't easy to do. And that's why it's so great to be able to have support through it so that you're not going it alone. Because when you are going alone, those fears can take over and it can just be exhausting and taxing and more comfortable to go to the way that you've always known, even if you know that it's not as effective. The fears play a big role in sticking with the known. If I do something that's unknown, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm afraid of doing that. I'd rather just stay here until you get to the point where it's really negatively impacting your relationship with your teenager and they don't want to talk to you or they're just completely gone all day, every day, and you just don't have a connection at all is the result sometimes.
And that would be really, really sad and not something that anyone
Yeah,
wants.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why having that long-term vision in your mind, what do I want my relationship with them to be like when they're an adult? And then starting to show up as the person that is in that relationship now in small ways. So, of course, when they're an adult, assuming they live on their own and they're independent, you're going to want them to be able to come to you and ask for support. Start being the person who's there when they need you versus forcing your way in when you think they need you. Start being the person who is fun to be around. Do fun things with them. Let it be light. It doesn't always have to be taskmaster. It can be fun. And that doesn't have to mean family game night. It can just mean driving in the car, listening to music, and going and getting a coffee. Little things where they will want to be around you, they'll enjoy being around you, and also a level of vulnerability. Just because you're the adult and you're the parent doesn't mean you know everything and that you don't struggle too. So being honest and open about challenges you face, whether it has anything to do with them or not, being a human around them so that they realize and it normalizes having normal life experiences, emotions, the ups and downs, challenges, self-doubt. We all have it. So being a real human, being somebody that's fun to be around, and being a good communicator with them, not dominating the conversation, approaching with curiosity. And that all comes down to managing your energy on a day-to-day basis. So doing things that will keep you feeling more calm on a day-to-day basis, because when you are managing your energy, you'll be less triggered by your teenager. You'll be more calm in conversations and you will be more fun to be around.
This is why I knew I had to have you on the show, because so much of what we do is applicable to marriage as well, right?
Yep.
To marriage and parenting.
Yep.
Same thing goes for making sure that your marriage is a priority. You've got to manage your energy so that by the end of the day, you're not like, oh, sorry, we're going to have to reschedule our time to hang out because I'm too tired. I don't have the energy.
Yeah.
Right? You being able to navigate conflict, whether it's with your child or with your spouse.
That's right.
You've got to know what's going on with you and approach it with, oh, I've already spent time reflecting on what's going on inside of me so that I have the capacity to offer compassion and patience and understanding to you and be able to get through the conflict without being reactive, without jumping down your throat and just, pointing the finger, casting blame, all the coping mechanisms that we have acquired throughout our years growing up with our parents and just in different relationships that lead to unhealthy communication. All of this spans across all relationships that we have that really matter to us.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that even though I know to do this for my husband, that I'm still having to remind myself that I've got to also do this for my kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for your enjoyment of life. Everything ties in together. And when you are more aware of your own emotions and your own triggers, you will have better relationships with everyone in your life, including with yourself.
Oh, yes. And I talk a lot about that, so I could not agree more.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about, what not to do and what to do. What can you recommend parents do if they feel their teenager pulling away? Because I personally have known people in my life where the mom is super involved, almost helicopter parent, to the point where the teenager is like, I hate when I get asked, how are you doing? How was your day? And they just do not like anyone trying to inquire about their life. They want to be the one to tell. They don't want to be badgered with questions. And now it's to the point where it's like, I don't even want to spend time with you. So how can someone recover from that shift?
Yeah. One of the reasons why parents can become helicopter parents is fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of not showing up in a way or not guiding properly. But the first step to being a more connected parent with a teenager is to step away and to realize that this is normal behavior. It is good for your teenager to want space. It's good for your teenager to want to be independent and to not come to you and need you for everything. That is a good thing, not something to be feared. And I like to use the analogy of being a lighthouse parent, where you are the beacon and you're stable in your space, and your teenager is the ship out on the ocean, looking to you for guidance versus you pulling them in. So you're there, they know you're there. And if you're questioning the amount of involvement that you have, to visualize yourself being that source of comfort and stability that your teenager is going to need for the rest of their life. Something that can be helpful with that is to find something outside of parenting to occupy your time, to occupy your energy and your interests. A lot of parents who are over-involved just don't have too much else going on in their life. And it's not because they don't want it. It's because they've been spending so much time focusing on their kids, which to a point has been great. But when those teen years hit, the opportunity to be involved is really cut down. So find something to replace that time. And always to communicate. If you're feeling like your teenager is pulling away or that you've been too involved and too hands-on, talk with your kids about it. Like, I'm recognizing this is happening. When it's happening, I feel sad or unneeded or I miss you. I'd really like to spend more time together and be intentional about it and make a plan so that it's structured and it's not you forcing yourself on them. And if you are wanting to step away, a lot of parents, one of the fears they have is my kid will think that I don't care about them anymore or that I'm not around anymore. But just talk with them about it. Like, you're growing up and I'm so proud of you for being so independent. I'm going to practice being more hands-off with you and know that you can always come to me and ask for support when you need it. Some teens may do that, some may not. They may have other people that they turn to, whether it's peers or counselors, but send that message. The door is always open for you to come talk to me. And if you notice that your teenager is never coming to you and that doesn't feel good, go back to that question. Hey, it looks like you're struggling with XYZ, or it looks like this is going on. How can I support you with this? That would be inserting yourself in a way where you're opening the door. Like, here's the door, come on in. Versus, here's the door, I'm going to pull you inside. I'm going to make you be inside because I feel better when you're inside. And that, again, goes back to the compassion. I know us as parents, like you said, our teenagers are still our babies. When they're adults, they're still going to be our babies. We're always going to want to nurture and protect them. But at some point, they need to learn how to nurture and protect themselves. And part of that is to know who to turn to. And you want to be that parent that they turn to. And the best way to do that is to stay stable, stay secure, keep that open message. No matter what, you can come to me and give them some space to do it.
I feel like this is very similar to when couples are having a lot of issues. Let's say the wife is constantly nagging the husband, feeling resentful that they get to go do whatever they feel like and they don't get to because they have all this housework and the kids to take care of. This is why it's so, so important to keep your sense of self intact. Go make friends. Nurture those relationships. Nurture a hobby that you have or develop a new passion.
Yeah.
Still be yourself. Take care of yourself. Go have fun. Go do things that are new to you. That's going to help all your relationships so much more because you are filling your own cup. You're making your own life full, not depending on other people to fill it up and feel like it's fulfilling and purpose driven. And plus, when we go do things for ourselves, we bring freshness into the relationships. We no longer obsess over things because we have too much time on our hands to obsess over these things.
Yeah.
Right? We are feeling like we have more capacity to handle things. We don't get offended so easily. We don't sit in our fear. Rather, we have more perspective about how to handle things, what's worth it and what's not worth it, right? Truly picking your battles. And I see so many moms who are just emulating that martyrdom that they witnessed their parents doing. And they're clinging onto these relationships, not knowing that they're actually causing more harm than care.
Yeah.
It's like that phrase,
If you love someone, set them free.
There you go. That. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the phrase. And it's true, right? Let people be themselves. And I think attaching the role of guide is such a good reminder and like an anchor for us or a North Star for us when it comes to our kids. No one wants to be told what to do. I'm approaching 40. I don't like to be told what to do. Our kids don't like to be told what to do. I have kids who hate being in a car seat because they don't like the feeling of restraint. And I get it.
Yeah.
Right? And so allowing them to make their choices, informing them as they grow up and feel confident about being a critical thinker is really all you can do. After that, it's like, okay, I'll be here to catch you when you fall. But otherwise, making those mistakes is the best way that they're going to learn. It's not by us shielding them by saying, okay, when you get here, like be mindful of this and da-da-da-da-da. Like they're not going to retain all that.
That's right. That's right. And the more you talk, the less they hear.
Yeah, that's been the biggest lesson for me because I was the parent who was like, always like, okay, I'm going to give you all the information that you need so that you can handle it better. And when you make a mistake, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why that wasn't a good idea. And oh my gosh, like, did I want to do that? No, but that's what came out. And that's where that self-care matters so, so much because now I'm able to practice more restraint and fully listen and get curious and ask more questions than speak.
Yeah.
And just like evening the playing field and letting, like you said, letting him know, like, look, I don't know what the right answer is here. I'm going to have to talk about it with your dad, but I would really love to hear what your motivations were, what your side is, what is it that you want out of this so that we can take it into consideration and form it into more of a collaboration rather than a hierarchical type of relationship dynamic.
Right. And that's where that shift is from I'm in charge, you do what I say, like I'm the boss, you're the employee, to we are co-creators of this relationship.
Yes. So good. I love it. Okay, I could talk about this stuff with you forever because there's so much overlap, but thank you so much for sharing all that you have shared. I know that you brought up so many gems for people to take away from this episode. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
So I have a podcast. It's called Raising Happy Teens. I recommend going and listening to that. There are over 100 episodes, lots of valuable information. You can also find me on Instagram at jennifer.delliquadri and my website, jenniferdelliquadri.com.
Love it. Okay, so if you resonated with this episode, whether you already have a teen or you will soon have a teen, or you're like super prepared and you have a toddler and you're like, okay, I got to prepare myself for this position, go check her out. Clearly, she knows her stuff. She has lived it. She has now got soon to be like full grown adults. And so she has a lot of experience to speak to this. And plus, she helps so many people with their relationships with their teenagers. So go connect with her, listen to her podcast, I will actually be a guest on one of her future episodes, so I can't wait for you to listen to that. But before I let you go, I love to ask my guests a question so the listeners can get to know you better. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's a food you can eat every day and never get sick of?
For me, it would be Mexican food. And I know that that's kind of a broad range, but I mean, chips and salsa, chips and guacamole, I could eat that every day without a doubt.
Yeah. Okay. Tacos or burritos for you? What do you prefer?
I love burritos. They're all contained. You can put a little salsa on the top. Delicious. I want one right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again so much for being a part of the show. If you loved this, please reach out to us and let us know what you took away from this episode so we can know what more you want to hear from us on our respective podcasts, and let Jennifer know where you found her from. If you go reach out to her, let her know, hey, I found you on Michelle's podcast, Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad you were able to stay till the end, and I'll catch you back here on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here for the next episode. Bye!